Hello everyone, welcome to the second video on the demand forecasting. In this video, I will introduce you to the approaches to the forecasting and we'll talk about time series components. So when it comes to forecasting approaches, we can broadly classify into two categories: judgmental and the quantitative method. So the judgmental methods rely on non-quantitative analysis of historical data. So as we are basing our forecasting decision on non-quantitative analysis of historical data, so we will rely on other sources of data such as consumer surveys, product analogies, which simply means when you launch a new product, you will not have data for the new product because we haven't made any sales yet. So in this case, you can use product analogy, so which means looking into the data for the similar products in order to do the projection. Other than that, you can reach out experts to have their opinion on it. So there are various judgmental methods that comes into play. So the next slide will introduce the judgmental methods. And I will not go through that slide, so I will ask you guys to have a look at those methods and we can discuss those during the live session. Then the second classification is under the quantitative techniques. So as the name stands, the quantitative methods, they rely on data analysis, will use historical data to predict the future demand for a given product or service. So there are various techniques which comes under quantitative methods, starting from very simple techniques such as naive forecast, moving average, exponential smoothing, weighted moving average, trend analysis. Then you have some advanced techniques such as artificial intelligence or machine learning based methods. So in this course, we'll look into basic time series models, which is naive forecasting model, moving average, weighted moving average, exponential smoothing, trend analysis, and seasonality analysis. So those are some of the basic models we'll explore here. And as I said earlier in my previous video too, if you're going to take COM 395, so in that course, you explore some of the advanced methods using a software package is called ForecastX. So here are some details on the judgmental methods. So as I said earlier, please read through the judgmental methods, and if you have any questions, we can discuss those during live sessions. So before we look into the quantitative methods, very first thing is the time series, because I used a term in the previous slide, time series analysis. So a time series represents a ordered sequence of observations which are taken at regular intervals of time. So when I say regular intervals of time, for instance, for a cafeteria, we may collect data for demand on hourly basis, data collected on weekly basis. So data is collected on a specific period of time, and all these observations are going to generate the historical data set or the past history of demand for a particular commodity. So there are 6 key components to any time series: level, which simply represents a horizontal pattern, which means average demand. So this average could be for the previous year, previous month, previous week, right? So you have used all the data points to take an average, so which will represent a straight line, right? So second component of time series is trend. So trend could show a upward or a downward movement. So some examples would be the population growth for a country would show a upward movement, right? Similarly, GDP growth, income growth. So similarly, there could be a downward trend for the population, for the GDP, similarly for the income too, right? So the idea here is you have a consistent data set which shows you either growth going upwards or there's a decrease which is coming downwards. So don't worry, let's clear out the terminology. We will come to an example on this. So the third one is seasonality. So where you have regular variations during the time of year, month, week, or day. Some examples here: for beer manufacturers, you are going to have a spike in demand for months. So there's a season here, right, where the demand peaks. Similarly, for a restaurant, you may have a demand peak on Friday or Saturday. So there's a season for each week for a restaurant, right? So for a cafeteria which is based in downtown where lots of offices are there, so you are expecting that they may have a season during the morning and during lunch hours. So cycles, Again, these are wave-like patterns, like seasonal patterns, but these waves, they last for more than a year, such as recession represents a cycle. The other term in business circles you use, business cycle, right? So you may have an upward business cycle for a number of years, then a downward business cycle during the recession, right? So these patterns, they last more than 1 year, right? The next one is irregular variations, so which are caused by unusual circumstances. So these don't reflect typical type of behavior. So in this case, the behavior is influenced by an external factor. For example, the shopper behavior is influenced by COVID-19, which is an external factor, right? So we'll not explore the irregular variations in this course, and because for these you need to have some event-based models. So if you're going to take COM 395, then you will look into irregular variations, right? To model the behavior of a particular time series. Next one is random variations. So random variations are caused by uncertainty in real life. So anything which cannot be explained based upon trend, seasonality, cycles, or the irregular variation caused due to the random variations, right? So here's an example. So what we have here along x-axis, we have time period. Along y-axis, we have demand for snowboards, and the blue line, which represents actual demand. As we can see here, the demand for the snowboards peaks around winter months, right? So this represents season for our product. So from here, we can say that this data set contains a seasonal component. At the same time, if we look at the overall data sets, there's a trend going upwards. Even though there's some peaks and valleys or highs and lows for each year, the aggregate demand from year to year is increasing, right? So there's a trend component which is going upwards. So if we look at this time series or the actual demand line, you can see that the series is quite smooth. However, there's one event that's where we have a spike. So that's caused by the random variation, because we don't have any explanation here, right? I mean, this is just an example. I mean, in certain cases, you may say that our competitor, he was putting a price discount. That's why the demand was suddenly dropped. Or we put some promotions. So that's why we have this spike here, right? So you may have some explanation, but otherwise, if you have no explanation here, this is caused by the uncertainty in the real life. Okay, so to reinforce what we discussed here regarding the time series, let's look into one example. So you have this Excel sheet, which is chapter 3 Excel. The sheet is available through Blackboard, and I'm going to work with very first data set, which is international airline travel data set. So let's use standard demand forecasting terminology. So this time series starts from 2000 and goes up to 2011. So for this time series, data is collected on monthly basis. So we have periodicity as monthly, right? So if we want to put this in the generic terms, so this is the period, and here in column B, I have demand, right? In order to see if there's any season trend or irregular variation, so select this data set and plot it. So let's plot it. So let's select A1, the cell A1, and then we go to insert and a line chart. So let's analyze this. So I'm going to make it a bit bigger so that we can see what is happening here. So very first thing which is evident from here is there are some spikes, right? For each around August here, August, and so on. So which represents a seasonal pattern. So we can easily, by looking at this data set, we can say there's a seasonality where demand of air travel spikes around August or September. Then the other thing we can say here is some random variation, because I don't have any explanation for these variations. So instead of having a smooth line, so when I say smooth line, instead of having something like which goes like this, I have some variation. If you have an explanation for it, then that's fine, but I don't have any explanation for it why it's happening. So in my case, this is a random variation. Is there a trend? Seems like a trend as the demand is increasing, right? So the other way to look at the trend is, so once you added a chart, click on the chart, select it, go to the design tab, and here's the add element. So if you left click and go to trend line, add a linear trend line. So there are other types of trend lines, but we will only work with linear trend line in this case. So I added a trend line. We can say there's an upward trend, right? And you can do different things when you added a trend line. If you select the trend line and click on this plus, and from here more options for the trend line, and I can display equation on the chart, right? So instead of you manually calculating the equation for trend line, Excel is going to automatically get this equation. From here we can say there's a trend going upwards because slope of this line is positive, right? So what I would like you guys to do, give it a go, add a plot, add a trend line, try to display the equation so that you are comfortable with Excel when it comes to plotting a given data set. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me during our live session. And I will see you in next video with some of the basic forecasting methods. Thank you very much.